All right, my friends. Well, speaking of rolling, I think it's time we move things right along because we have another awesome presentation in the wings. And as you can see, this is another returning veteran of the MegaCast, another awesome presenter that you will all recognize and be excited for because we now get to chat with the HYCU team. Dun, 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 dun. So up next on the MegaCast, we will be connecting with Andy Fernandez, Director of Product Management at HYCU. Andy, thank you so much for being back here with us on the MegaCast. Always a pleasure to chat with you. I'm going to join you for some Q&A at the end, but I'll hand things on over to you.
Thank you so much, Jess. It's the best introduction I could ever get, so I really appreciate that. With that being said, folks, I wanted to thank you for your time and attention today. We've only got 20 minutes, and I really want to focus on the topic at hand today. So the focus of today's session really is on cyber resilience. And what I would love for you to leave here is not understanding how is HYCU or any other competitor a better approach for SaaS backup. I simply want you to leave this session with a plan of action, understanding SaaS cyber resilience. The reason I bring up resilience here is by the end of this year, there will be $200 billion spent on cybersecurity, specifically prevention technologies. What does that actually mean? Well, it means that we continue to spend more on cybersecurity, yet we see attacks happen all of the time. And because of that very fundamental reason is why you have to think about backup and recovery as your last line of defense. But the most important thing to address here, in today's topic being about SaaS itself, is let's actually talk about adding a recovery of a last line of defense to your SaaS applications. We're going to get into that. But before we do that, I actually want to poll the audience. And I would love to get an insight from everybody here from your perspective, your experience in your organization. And the question is, how many as a service applications do you actually have? And I'm going to pause here because I want you to think critically about this. Don't just think about Microsoft 365 or Salesforce. Think about IT. Think about engineering. Think about your business departments like finance, HR, and all of these other places. And also think about your cloud services. Now, I would love for you to take a couple more minutes and let me check the audience to see in the chat if anybody has mentioned what they're using. Let's see if I get any questions from anybody around here. Let's get a few guests. But what I promise you is that whatever sum you're thinking about is going to be much, much higher in reality. So now keep that number in mind because what I'm going to show you is the average amount of SaaS applications inside of a mid-sized organization. It's 217. Over 200 SaaS applications that are used in mid-sized companies. When I say mid-sized companies, I'm not talking about an organization of 5, 10,000 employees. I'm talking about 1,000, 2,000 employee organizations already using 217 SaaS applications. Obviously, this is a mean average, so there might be lower, and some organizations might be a lot higher. But how did we get here? How did we get to this point where you have 217 SaaS applications? Well, let's take a step back in time. Let's go 10, 15, really 15 years ago to understand the relationship of compute, business applications, and how they were managed. So if you go back 15 years ago, you owned a castle. You were the king or queen of this castle, and you had the ability to understand exactly what applications that you had. Why? Well, you had a data center, and you had virtual applications and physical applications running in this data center. You had a finite amount of applications and one single place to take a look. Maybe you had a colo facility, some DR continuity facilities as well, but primarily you had a data center that you had to look after. You had firewall infrastructure, you had networking, you had everything you needed and everything is in one place and you had a moat. And life was easy from a management perspective. Why? Because all of your applications were backed up because you were backing up VMware, as you were supposed to do as an IT administrator. But where are we today? Well, today there's an A24 movie that I think is incredible. It's called Everywhere All at Once. And that's an exact definition of what we see SaaS applications. Think about your organization today. Regardless of what applications that you're using, they are running in somebody else's hardware. They are being processed by somebody else. And you no longer have a specific application in one place or in your data center, they're all over the place. And it can become very, very difficult to have a true accounting of where is my data? What is the residency? Is it being protected or not? And let's actually double down a little bit more into this phenomenon, because this is, in my opinion, a ticking time bomb and a critical thing that every organization needs to address. And it's SaaS sprawl. And here's how it's happened. As I mentioned, you had your on-prem infrastructure. Life was nice, clean, tidy. You were backing up. You had your DR and you had your backup infrastructure. In fact, you were probably using a lot of the vendors that we see on today's webinar as well. But what happened? Well, the first phenomenon that happened was every application that used to be a server or data center deployment, whether it's Microsoft 365 or Salesforce or even Jira that is now Atlassian Cloud, all of these applications are now SaaS. They're no longer stored in your data center. They are no longer in your control. You no longer have backups for them, but you still have responsibility for that. And during this webinar, my other colleagues are going to talk to you about the critical responsibility of backing up SaaS applications. So I'm not going to go ahead and do that for them. I really want to focus on a couple of other pain points as well. But the first one is you have to take accounting of how many business applications you're using, not just in IT, not just under your productivity or collaboration umbrella, but across the entire organization. But it doesn't stop there, though, does it? Even your security, even your identity access management, your key management, your critical networking and cloud services, if you're using public cloud, are also SaaS applications. This means that all of these configurations in this data are once again somewhere else, not inside of your data center. And the last thing that I'll mention, of course, is the traditional compute, database, and containerized applications that you now have running within AWS or Azure or Google Cloud. But something that I want to mention about these cloud services as well is there are over 300 cloud services in AWS. Each one of them brings you tremendous scale and value, but guess what? They're all decoupled. They all hold critical data, critical configurations that, if deleted or attacked, could mean that your organization is in trouble from a cyber resilience perspective. Now, I'm not here to provide some type of doomsday expectation here. Obviously, there are solutions to this. But the point is, you have to take SaaS sprawl extremely seriously. And at HYCU, there are two core things that we focus on. The first one is you cannot protect what you don't know. If you don't know what applications are being used, if they're being protected and who's not, you have to go out and do so. Because if you don't know what's out there, you cannot protect it. So you have to understand your threat surface. Not only the business SaaS applications, but also your critical cloud services. And I don't mean just your EC2 instance and your S3 storage, but I mean your VPCs, your IAM, even Terraform. All of these things count as ICTs or cloud services. They must be protected. So the plan of action here is you must first understand the problem that you're dealing with, expose all these applications. You have to map out responsibility, departmental ownership, and most importantly, you have to identify the ones that are unprotected. Because if there is a specific deletion, misconfiguration, or even direct attack on you, even if it's a SaaS, it's your responsibility to recover. So you have to make sure that once you have this assessment, that you triage and identify the right applications that need to be protected. And then the next one is once you identify, okay, these are, the 5 to 6 most critical applications I need to protect, you have to make sure at minimum that you automate the backup process. This has to be done daily. You have to make sure that you test it. If you don't test your backups, if you don't test recovery, you do not have a backup strategy. And I don't mean just being able to restore or recover an entire instance, but I mean granular data as well. And this is critical. One of the most important things that you could do, if you walk away with one item from this session, is that you have to do everything in your power to store copies outside of the SaaS application that you're using. When I say this is whether it's M365, Salesforce, Atlassian, you want to have a copy of that outside of the SaaS itself in case of DR, in case of ransomware, but also from a data retention and compliance perspective. And ultimately, you also want to build a process. Who owns what? Who's protecting what? Who can recover what? Especially if you're an organization that has, even at minimum, dozens of applications. Now, one of the things that I want to talk a little bit about is this is the problem that we at HYCU explicitly observed. We come from protecting critical applications on-prem and cloud. But we realized that our own customers were rapidly moving to SaaS applications. They were rapidly modernizing, and we needed to make sure that we built a platform that kept up. And maybe in another time, or if you want to reach out to me, we'll have a conversation about what that platform really is. And it's called HYCU R Cloud. But what I can say confidently is that it's the first and only data protection platform that's built to scale to protect the world's thousands of applications. And if there's a couple highlights here, it's not just about saying, hey, we protect Microsoft 365 and Salesforce. We're a SaaS data protection leader. That's unacceptable. We know how many organizations are using dozens, if not hundreds, of SaaS applications, which is why we have more than 65 sources that are protected in our marketplace. And most importantly, we have an NPS of over 90 because we are obsessed with our customers and making sure that they are successful. But there's only two things, very basic things, but very important things that I'm going to talk to you about what Haiku is able to do. The first one is actually giving you a free way to fully visualize and discover your data estate. And don't worry, I'm actually going to be able to show this to you shortly. But it's called rGraph. It's built into that R Cloud platform that I was telling you about. And using Okta or Entra ID or even both, and simply signing in via an API token, you're going to be able to discover your entire data estate. You're going to be able to map it by department, but most importantly, you're going to be able to expose those unprotected applications and actually make sure that you're resilient. So when something does happen, you always have a means to be able to recover. Now, the second most important piece here is once you've actually identified the problem, well, you have to do something about it. And that's why within Haiku, we give you the ability to not only simply subscribe to a source, meaning an application that you want to protect, but to immediately start backing it up. All you need to do is go to our marketplace, search for the application, connect via an API token, and you can start protecting and assigning backup policies in one click. But before I go into a demo and actually show you in real life how this works, there's a statement that I want to make because we're talking about protecting SaaS applications. We know that recovery is the last line of defense. We know that at minimum, you should have daily backups of all critical applications, regardless of where they are. And what I'm proud to say, because of our cloud, because of our extensible approach, we are by far the leader in data protection for SaaS applications. And if you look here, on the left is all of these services, simply business applications that are protected by Haiku. It is over 30. When you take a look at every other backup and recovery vendor in the Gartner Magic Quadrant outside of Haiku, there's only a handful that are totally protected in the aggregate. All competitors combined are only protecting a small amount of SaaS applications. We realized this was a problem. This is why we truly went out to not only make sure we protected critical on-prem and cloud, but also those business applications as well. This is just a sample of some of the SaaS applications that Haiku protects. And in fact, we didn't stop there. We also made sure to protect cloud services, which is why there are over 30 cloud services that we're also able to protect. But with that being said, I'd rather just show you how it works. Now, Jess, I may ask for some confirmation from you
Right
to make
here
sure
with
that
you,
you can
Andy.
see my screen.
Yes, nailed it on the first try. Such a pro.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jess. Now, folks, what you're looking here is our cloud. This is a SaaS that runs where you want it to run according to your residency requirements. And it's the one place that you go to protect your data with Haiku. Now, already in the keynote and other sessions, they did an excellent job about talking about MFA. Obviously, that's something that we have built in and incorporated, but I'm going to focus on two specific things. The first one I'm going to focus on is the actual discovery of these applications. As I mentioned, sometimes this is the hardest part, even understanding what you have to protect. So here is exactly how Haiku is able to do this with you. By the way, what I'm about to show you is accessible to anybody in this audience. At the end, I'll give you a code, but you can access this yourself for free. But let's actually talk about this. What you're seeing is the actual R graph viewed live using Haiku's applications, even the things that we're running so that you can see how a real company uses this. And what R graph does is all you need to do is leverage Okta, Entra ID, or both, and you can simply now discover, after adding your API token, your entire data estate. What do I mean by that? Well, think of this as your company. This is Haiku. This is our company right now. And then you can see these yellow nodes. What we do is we actually crawl through the entire directory in Okta, in Entra ID, and within our IP, we're able to actually associate all of the applications that belong to each department. So on a step-by-step basis, you can start exposing all of the applications that are being used in each of these departments. So you can start building a plan and understanding what are some of the problem areas. And the reason I bring this up is because we've even seen in these assessments where organizations had CMOs with larger tech stacks than the CTO itself. And that's when we realized that SaaS sprawl was a problem. And all I'm doing now for everybody who's wondering why I'm moving around so much is actually showing you how crazy SaaS sprawl can actually be. These are the SaaS services that we use in our organization. This is where your data sits outside of a data center in somebody else's cloud without you having a clean offsite copy of it. So the point of our graph is to be able to actually show you, first of all, what kind of a problem are you dealing with? But most importantly, we help you organize it. And for those who follow basketball, I always like to look at this UI almost as a March Madness approach. But what you're able to do is follow the same data structure, meaning this is my company, this is my department, but now I can start really highlighting certain SaaS applications. And we can say, look, on the productivity and collaboration side, we've actually noticed that we're using Zendesk and we're using Zoom. These are critical applications. With Zendesk, if you don't have your support tickets and you lose all that data, that is legal trouble, that is product trouble, that is engineering trouble. And what if you're a legal firm and you are recording all of your Zoom conversations and you lose them all? Well, did you know that Zoom does not have any type of self-service recovery? They don't have backup automation. They don't have any way to actually store those copies offsite in a safe way that's automated. Same thing applies to Box, to Slack. So what Haiku is able to do is not only show you the volume, but actually tell you, look, according to all these departments, here's what we found. Here are the applications that we know have no native protection. And once again, what you can do now is say, well, there's 3 applications that I want to protect. Well, all you have to do is go to the Haiku marketplace and you can search for it. So let's say that we realize that DocuSign is completely unprotected. Well, all you need to do is you can start, and everyone here can access a free trial of this, is add an API token of DocuSign and immediately start protecting it. And I'm going to show you why this is so important. Let's grab something on the engineering side. Let's grab something like Jira. Jira is one of the most critical applications. Let's say that I added Jira as a source and now have discovered all of my instances. What Haiku can do is standardize all backup processes. What I mean by this is whether I discovered Jira, Okta, GitHub, Salesforce, ClickUp, Asana, it doesn't matter. It's the same user experience where in one click, I can set a policy. And that policy can be a simple daily policy or something more sophisticated. But you can also just build your own policy, especially if you oversee many SaaS applications, you probably want to have some customization. But the most important part here, apart from recovery, is where does that data actually go? Well, instead of it being stored by Haiku or somebody else, you can point your storage, your account, for example, Amazon S3, and that will be the target site of all of your backup copies. Haiku doesn't store them. Think of us as a fully encrypted highway taking data automatically as you prescribe to your storage location so that you always have a safe area to recover. So what does that actually mean? Well, I've assigned my policy, I've stored it in AWS. Well, finally somebody did an oopsie. What do? Well, it's not just bulk script restore, it's actually granular item level restore from project level all the way down to specific configurations. This applies to Jira, this applies to GitHub, it applies to all of the SaaS applications. But you say, well, Andy, what if you don't support some of these applications? Well, within our product itself, you can request support for an application. And because of our association with Anthropic, because of the our cloud development platform, you will very, very quickly see support for that. And that is unmatched. That is why you're seeing over 60 integrations when the industry has only been able to do just a couple of SaaS applications. Now, I can go on about our cloud and the value of our platform all day, but what I want to leave you all with is a simple call to action. And all I ask for is take a true accounting of your data estate, of your cloud services, and really understand, do I have full visibility? Do I know what's protected? and take the right steps to go and start protecting it. Whether it's with HYCU or somebody else, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you are protecting your data. What I added here is a QR code where you can scan this, register, and you will receive a free, no strings attached consultation. There are no sales. It is simply an engineer waiting there to advise you. You can also do it yourself, but in less than 5 minutes, as long as you're an Okta or an Entra ID user, you will be able to discover all of the services associated and actually start building a plan to truly protect all of your SaaS. But with that, I'm going to pause because I know there's probably a ton of questions, Jess.
There are. We've got some great questions coming in. Thank you so much for that, Andy. Tons of great info. And you're right. It's always great to get into it, see things in action. So I'm glad we got to kind of jump in together. And I hope that the folks out there, I'm going to leave this QR code up just for a second longer because I want to make sure that you get a chance to scan that QR code. I'm going to move over to a poll though. So last chance, grab your phone, get that QR code scanned and done. Okay. Now we've got a little poll up for all of you. And again, this is your wish list. This is your shopping list. What would you like to get in follow-up to this incredible conversation we just got to have with Andy? What could HYCU send you that would be helpful to follow up? So think about data sheets or white papers. Maybe you want to do a personalized demo, whatever it is that would be helpful for you. Click on the screen right now and let HYCU know how they can follow up with you. While you're doing that, Andy and I are going to dig into some questions. Andy, are you ready?
Absolutely.
Always. I knew that. All right, Andy. Well, let's start out with this one here. We got a couple of questions coming in around how the backup policies are assigned. And one of the follow-up questions to that was, are there limitations to the customization or to how those can be assigned?
No, absolutely not. In fact, because it's your storage, because you have full control of this data, you decide on the backup policy. So you can say, well, I'd like to take a daily backup, or I'd like to take a backup every hour. That's totally up to you. And also the retention period is totally up to you because it's storage in your control.
Oh, perfect. Okay, well, that might tie in nicely to our next question. We have an audience member wondering if you could elaborate on where the backups are stored.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, right, you can store it in Amazon S3. You can store it in Wasabi in Google Cloud Storage. That's S3 compatible. And we will be adding Azure as a storage target as well. So as long as you have an active account there, you get to control the storage access. And even if you want to enable immutability for that as well.
Nice. I like it. You have all the power. All right. Well, we got a couple of questions about licensing. And so I'm going to connect that in with a sort of follow-up question here. So wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about licensing, but also we got a question about whether or not you need to be a HYCU customer in order to use our graph. Can you answer those for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Licensing is easy, actually. One, it's a SaaS, right? So it's a pay-as-you-go per user per month approach. Whatever the application that you're trying, whatever application you're trying to protect, however you're subscribed to it, that's most likely how you're going to pay the backup for it as well. Take, for example, Okta. It's on a per user basis. Well, HYCU will be licensed on a per user basis as well. But our graph is a visibility tool. Our graph is for you to be able to discover your estate, and that's totally free, no strings attached as well.
Perfect. Okay, nice and easy. We're running short on time here, so I'm going to start to wrap it up. You know, one thing I was just kind of curious about, Andy, because we did get a couple people writing in and saying that they had, when we were asking at the start here about the amount of applications that they were, needing to consider when they're looking at their backup. And I saw answers coming in ranging from, 1 up to, I think we had 150. We had a couple of dozen at least. Is that kind of in keeping with what you would expect to see from the audience today?
Yeah, and of course there's going to be a ton of variability, but as long as you're not in the federal government, you're going to be using a substantial amount of business applications. I've seen organizations who's done an incredible job and they're using 20, 30. I've seen 800, 900, especially at the large enterprise level. It's extremely variable, but the common denominator here is that it's always more than the IT team believes to have.
That's a fantastic takeaway. And I think the other key point that I'm really holding on to at the end of your presentation was to just do something. So regardless of what your environment looks like, regardless of what that list looks like, whether it's 1 or 900, which is insane, is to start taking those action steps now. And I think you've given us some great places to get started. I wish we could keep chatting with you always, Andy, because it's such a pleasure. But since I think we're going to have to wrap it up, can you give the audience sort of a next step if they really want to jump in and start learning learning more about HYCU in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, you can actually just email me at andy.fernandez@haiku.com if you just want to have a product conversation. If not, scan the QR code, click that link, and you'll be able to access the product yourself. No strings attached for those who've voted to likely to try it themselves. That's available to you. We're simply here to make sure that you're able to solve the SaaS problem as well. So I want to thank you all for your time.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for joining us, Andy. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Jess.